Assassin's Creed 3 is a really underrated entry in the Assassin's series. The title definitely has its fair share of weaknesses, but it is a good game overall. Originally released in 2012, this title has already received a remaster in 2019. The main story is set in the 18th century Colonial America from the year 1754 to 1783 and follows two different characters, Haytham Kenway and his son Connor. Haytham is the playable character in the prologue, but for the rest of the game you're gonna be playing as Connor. And you're also gonna be playing as Desmond Miles in the out of animus segments or the modern day segments of the game, in which Desmond uses the animus to relive the memories of his ancestors to find a way to avert the 2012 apocalypse. The main 18th century narrative of the game is set in an open world featuring locations such as Boston, New York City along the American frontier. And yeah, portions of eastern seaboard and Caribbean Sea can be explored in the naval side missions in the game. The story and setting, both the things are really good. The story lets you live and experience historical events such as the Boston Tea Party. Then along the story you will meet historical figures such as George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Samuel Adams, Edward Braddock and several others. Then you are also going to be fighting in the American Revolutionary War as Connor. Connor is the main protagonist of the story here, and he is half British, half Mohawk Assassin. Connor's story in the game spans through 2 decades of his life. We get to experience his childhood first of all after the prologue, and then later on we play as a mature version of Connor who eventually trains to become an assassin. Connor's character is very different from someone like Ezio from the past games. And that's because, unlike Ezio, Connor has had a really rough childhood. Connor was raised by his Mohawk mother and never saw his father until he was a man. And the Mohawk people were already having a really tough time because of the colonials and their constant expansion. When a terrible tragedy strikes Connor and he loses his mother right in front of his eyes because of an attack from the colonials. A grown-up Connor has a strong desire to avenge his mother and to also protect his land and people from the colonials. The High Lady of the Mohawk village directs Connor to an old guy named Achilles who was an assassin back in the day. Though initially reluctant, Connor eventually convinces Achilles to train him as an assassin. Achilles not just trains Connor, he also adopts him and gives him the name Connor, which was the name of his deceased son. Connor's actual Mohawk name was something that I could never dream of pronouncing, so yeah, I stuck with Connor. Anyways, Connor is kind of a one-dimensional character in a way because he's like always very serious. He is not like Ezio who had multiple layers to his personality. But it's not exactly a negative in my personal opinion, and that's because Connor has had a rough childhood and he didn't just lose his mother, but his people are constantly under pressure because of the colonial expansion. Their culture, their land, everything is in danger and they are on the edge constantly. He is out there not just for vengeance but also to try and protect his people, his culture, his land, and it is a mighty responsibility and is something that is gonna make you serious, and that's why the entire one-dimensional character thing, it feels really natural. Yeah, it might be boring to some, but it obviously is natural and falls into place here. But yeah, they could have definitely added a romantic angle in order to show a different side of his character. But still, Connor's character is really good the way it is. He's really focused, really patient, and a fierce warrior. And the warrior part brings us to the biggest strength of this title, and that is combat. The combat is brutal and it is super fun. The enemy variety is great and requires tactical awareness. The presence of different types of enemies means you have to use different strategies to create an opening in order to attack. And yeah, chaining attacks and countering attacks is really fun and brutal. Multiple takedowns are possible while in combat, and yeah, they look really cool. Then you can also use human shields against firing lines of enemies. Weapons include muskets, swords, pistols, along with native weapons such as tomahawk, my personal favorite, and bow and arrow, the rope dart, which can be used to pull or hang enemies from above. And yeah, then the assassin's signature hidden blades, who can forget that. The combat flows really well, it is really smooth, and yeah, I really love the combat in this title. It is my favorite Assassin's Creed title in terms of combat. And yeah, another thing which is like really cool is the list of bad guys. You get to know them quite a bit in the prologue, and yeah, the prologue was quite a surprise back in the day. The bad guys include Charles Lee, Thomas Hickey, John Pitcairn, Benjamin Church, William Johnson, and Nicholas Biddle. A very powerful moment earlier on in the story pits a child Connor against these baddies headed by Charles Lee, and Connor is obviously defenseless. His journey from that particular moment to the time when he takes out all these guys one by one is epic, and makes those final moments with the baddies really powerful. And yeah, the relationship between the leader of the baddies and Connor makes this title really special. The story missions are pretty good too. And then this was the first Assassin's Creed game to feature naval combat, which later became the core of the next Assassin's Creed game, Assassin's Creed 4 The Black Flag. In this game, however, the naval combat plays a really small role. Connor has access to this ship called Aquila, and you can buy upgrades for that and stuff. The ship is used only in a few main story missions, and then you also have a series of dedicated side missions involving the ship. The naval combat obviously adds some really cool variety to the gameplay and gives a good break from the regular assassin stuff, but I'm not a big fan of the naval combat as it's not my thing. I don't really hate it, but it's not something that I'm into. Then the game also features a recruitment system similar to that of Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. Citizens can be enlisted by completing these optional liberation missions. But you can only recruit 6 assassins in this game, but each single assassin has a distinct personality and backstory along with a much larger skill set. They can start riots, provide a cover escort, and set up ambush and stuff like that. The economy in this game is now based on the Davenport homestead, which also acts as Connor's adoptive home. You can actually build a small community of skilled individuals at Davenport homestead by recruiting tailors, carpenters, people who have been displaced because of the war. You can help them build relationships with each other, and they're gonna craft stuff for you to trade in the cities using caravans. Then the game also features collectibles and mini games like checkers and stuff like that. The game also has a wide variety of animals present as well, both domestic and wild, and in the frontier you can actually hunt animals and sell stuff, so yeah, that is pretty cool. For hunting you can set up traps and use bait and whatnot, and it's a fine mechanic. Movement and parkour is super responsive and it is really good. And then the presentation is great. The cities, the frontier, everything looks great. The character models, everything is fantastic. And the remastered version which came out in 2019 is definitely better looking. But the OG version has aged really well too. And the game was pretty decent in terms of optimization when it originally came out way back in 2012. Great combat, really fluid movement and parkour, along with a really good cast of characters, a good story and a really good setting too. Presentation is really nice, and you've already got a remaster if you want even better. But in the beginning of the video I said that this title has its fair share of weaknesses, so yeah, it's time to dive into those now. The prologue of the game ends on a really surprising note, but it is a bit of a drag. The story is nice and the twist is amazing, but the missions in the prologue, they are not fantastic. The earlier missions in the prologue are actually decent, but the later ones feel really boring, and especially because of the fact that you have to travel long distances in order to start a mission. And in that particular phase of the game you don't have access to a fast travel system, which I forgot to mention is a really good feature in this game. You've got horses to traverse the game world, and in my opinion they are pretty slow. And then in this particular phase of the game you've got too much snow around in the prologue in these particular missions that I'm talking about, and the movement is generally really sluggish and it feels painfully slow and boring. The prologue takes a decent amount of time, and some of the missions in the prologue are decent, but overall it feels slow and boring in general. It has some decent missions, but overall it feels slow and boring. But at least it ends on a higher note with a good twist towards the end. Another reason that makes the prologue feel boring in the game is the fact that you don't have access to the fun weapons that Connor has later on. And yeah, playing as Haytham is not fun in terms of combat. So after going through this lengthy prologue, you are now ready to jump into the assassin's costume, and you are ready to use those signature hidden blades. Well, you're gonna have to hold your horses, Mr. Aspiring Assassin, because you are a kid right now, you gotta grow up first. Then you're gonna have to find Achilles, then you're gonna have to train, and then you're gonna be able to do the assassin stuff. So yeah, you can see what is wrong with all this. The story is pretty good throughout all this, but the gameplay feels sluggish and boring, and this is a phase in the game where you want to get through this as quickly as possible. Simply put, it takes too long to get to the core action, the corner stuff, the fun stuff, the combat, the tomahawks, everything. It takes a decent amount of time to get there, and that is something that is a big negative. And then, to add to all of this, you've got the out of animus segments where you play as Desmond Miles in the current day and age, the modern era, and I really don't like these segments. These segments, they look really cool, and I can totally see why they did it. I mean, it's a story thing, and from a story point of view, it's pretty good. But I mean, playing through these segments is like really tedious, and I see them as hurdles because they get in the way. They are like add-ons that you don't really want, so yeah, pacing issues. But yeah, playing as the assassin Connor is fantastic. The combat is really fun, it is really addictive, and it is brutal and it is ridiculously fun. Connor is not a flamboyant character like Ezio, but I really like him. He's like super focused, he's had a rough time in the past, and he's fighting for his land, his culture, his people. And they did a really good job by introducing the Mohawk tribe and their culture and their struggles, and they acknowledged them, which was really, really cool. And the historic portions of the game, they were just fantastic. So yeah, Connor is definitely not the star of the show when it comes to the Assassin's roster, but he's a really solid guy. He's super dedicated to his cause. He's dedicated to his people and his culture and land, and it is fantastic. But a romantic angle in the story would have made his character much more likable. This title ties really well into several other Assassin's Creed games, like Assassin's Creed Rogue, where you get the backstory for Achilles and you also see more of Haytham Kenway, and then in Assassin's Creed Liberation, where Connor appears as a supporting character, and that title was a beta title originally, I think, and then also to Black Flag. This title is totally worth a revisit. It has its flaws, but the good parts, they completely outweigh the bad ones, and it is far from a bad game. It is really fun, and in terms of combat, it is my favorite Assassin's Creed game ever, and I really love the combat. And yeah, it is available on so many generations of consoles thanks to the backwards compatibility and the remaster as well. And you also got it available on the Nintendo Switch. And if you are on PC and have a low-end one, definitely go with the OG version. It has aged really well and is really well optimized. And if you enjoyed the video, do leave a like. And if you love the movement and parkour in the Assassin's Creed games, I'm sure you're gonna like this video about Middle-earth Shadow of War, which also features a similar movement system, much more fluid, but similar. So yeah, do check that out, and thank you very much for watching. Peace out.